So, somebody gave me a barbecue. It's a nice barbecue. Has a couple of things I have to repair, like the auto start, but it does work and it does function. So we're going to be installing this barbecue. So this is where the barbecue is going to go. That's the old barbecue space. Now it has to be 3 feet wide, and I'm going to be putting a block that's going to fit right in, just like it was a stand, and be right there. So that's the new location for the new barbecue. Okay, so we're getting ready to actually install the barbecue. As usual, what do we need to install the barbecue? We need a screw gun to put the screws through. We're going to use wood screws. Now here's a funny fact. Another video, I think it was the tag pole, I went out to find a tape measure, couldn't find any, and I made a comment about I have them all over the house. Well, at best, when I picked up my screws last time, I decided to put all my tape measures in that box. At least here's 3 of them I have here now. But anyway, we're using deck screws. Special head so they don't strip out. Need to have a T-square because now we're putting something in, so it's not just appearance, it has to be straight, otherwise it's going to look really odd and it's not going to fit right and bounce around. I'm going to start with my pencil. We'll see how long that lasts before I lose that, and I go and get another pencil, tape measure, and of course a saw, and of course the ever so popular, the wood. So what do we do first? First thing I did, and also just so you know, yes, this is a one-man build, but at the same time, I have a helper. I have my mini skid steer. For one-man builds out here like this in the middle of nowhere, where you don't have anybody around, you can just call and say, hey, Bob, come and help me move this if you could. That is a perfect friend. It is the best $4,000 I have ever spent. I have used it constantly. I think it has 12 hours on it of actual use, according to the timer. But very good investment, constant use. As you see, I just picked up the barbecue and oh, I'm going to do a build. Well, let's pick up the barbecue and bring the barbecue to me. So that was in the garage from the beginning of the video. I put it on here, brought it here. So here's the first thing you have to do. You have to measure. When I get it up here, I'm going to pinpoint exactly where I measured, but you have to measure the hole the barbecue is going to go in. Now, the hole the barbecue goes in is not where you cut this beam. This beam is not going to be the same as that hole. The barbecue is 34 inches across from side to side. That's going to be our opening. However, on either side of the barbecue, we're going to have a beam that holds it on this side, and we're going to have a beam that holds it on this side. So the barbecue is going to be in between these 2 beams. The top of the barbecue is going to sit on these actual beams, so it's going to look about like that when we get done. You're going to see the edge, you'll have the barbecue, these are going to be level and perfect and held up. You just set the barbecue in there, and all is be well. The front of this, you push the barbecue back. The front of the barbecue is actually wider than the hole. So the front of the barbecue is going to hit right here. The front of the barbecue is going to hit right here and stop. So you probably won't see most of this, but that's going to be a stopping point. Then what we're going to do is we're going to see if we can find a place to put a couple screws in so the thing doesn't fall off. It's heavy. I don't think it's going to fall off, but that's the way I build things. I want to make sure when I put them someplace, they're going to stay. Then we're going to take and put 2 supports on either side of this, supports that go all the way down to the beam that's on the bottom, in the back. So we'll have 2 beams, 2 pieces, barbecue slides in, and we'll probably end up putting a beam that doesn't go all the way down because you have the gas outlet, a beam in the back, so when you push it in, you don't just push it off onto the ground. Or if you lean against it, you don't push it off. So we'll have this here, we'll have that there, we're going to put a beam in the back, and we're going to see about putting a screw maybe in this here to hold it in place so it doesn't move forward. So that's the plan. Let's get going. These were cut off, not here, but I already cut these off. I'll give you the measurement when the barbecue that's up here I used to measure these. These are 20 inches. The actual barbecue behind that front plate is 19. I like an extra inch, so I'm gonna give myself an extra inch. So, first thing we're gonna do, this is a board we're gonna cut off. But I don't want to write on it because I might use it someplace else. So I got a junkie board. We know the barbecue is 34 inches. That's the space we need in the middle. That is a space on this side of this board. That's not the space on this side we're going to cut. So since we already know that lumber doesn't always come perfect, I always measure my lumber. So I know exactly what I have to add or subtract. So if I measure my two side pieces, I know I'm looking at 3 1/8. So we're going to call it 3 1/4, so you have a little bit of leeway. Okay, in case you're wondering, because if you watched my other videos, you know I've had issues with all kinds of issues with audio. So I've just replaced the entire audio system. I now have a mini audio system by Hollyland. You probably can't read it. You see the little logo. This is the mic. I get a kit that has 2 mics, and it has a little transceiver that goes, a receiver actually, that goes on either a lapel, on something. It has a USB port so you can go to an app on iPhone, or it just has an audio out, which is what I'm using now. And I'm taking my Canon camera and making my left and right, or my 1 and 2 channel, both running off number 1. So if this mic, I have 2 of these, if this mic ends up getting low, I'll switch it so it runs off number 2, and then everything changes to the other channel, and it'll be the other half of the stereo. So I basically get 2 power mics. You get 2 power mics, or 2 mics that are really small. They're about the size of a quarter, about probably the thickness of like 5/4. So they're really small, and they're magnetic, so you can stick them on anything metal. But it comes with clips and pieces and parts and all that good stuff. It's not windy today, so I'm not using the windshield. We'll see how that turns out. Okay, so we ended at 34, 3 1/4 is our beams, so we have to cut a hole that's 30 3/4. However, we already have 1 cut on the system, on the wood, because I have a beam that comes right here. So I'm leaving that. So this is going to be my first cut. So I'm only going to make 1 cut. So I have to go .30 3/4. Okay, so this is what happens when you're running wild and you're running off and you're just trying to get something done, but you don't double check your numbers, you don't double check things. As I put the board up, I paused, and I'm thinking to myself, if I add a board to my beam I already have, how am I going to subtract my numbers to get to 30 3/4? If I'm adding the beam and I still need to be 34, because that's what I measured the barbecue at, I need to add to it. So my actual opening is not going to be 34 minus 3 1/4, it's going to be 34 plus 3 1/4, making it 37 1/4. Now we can move forward. We take our beam, we know it's going to sit there, our 37 1/4 is already inclusive. We know we start at this point, which is where we're going to start, and we go over 37 1/4. That should give us our cut that we have to make on this to remove it so we can put a barbecue in. Then we have another beam to deal with after we support it. We'll go to the next beam. There's going to be 2 different cuts to make the hole so we can put the barbecue in. Of course, everything has to be, you don't want to use this side. It looks cool for this purpose, but it's going away, kind of sad. But that's not good to measure our exact square. So we're going to use the outside to put our square. We're going to put our line. It doesn't matter if we cut into the board underneath this, because we're going to cut that board off as well, so we can screw our beam on to an L, the one in the back, the one on the top, and then we'll put another bracket next to that to give support to the bottom. You'll see. So let's cut that. Somebody sent me a message on one of my videos that my saw cutting is too loud. So at this stage, instead of figuring something else out, I'm just going to stop recording, cut, and then put record back on. Take off one of my reusable screws. I've used that one probably 4 times now as I change things. We're going to take off our piece that represents our barbecue. Plus, this is the hole our barbecue should go in. As you see, we have a board in the back. As you also see, if I was to cut this board, if we look at it, there's no support in the middle of this. So I have to gain support. No, I don't need to get more sign-ups to gain support. I need to actually gain support by putting a board there. So now we're going to add a board, one of those pieces I took off, one that actually has screws in it. We're going to put a board right under here like this. And that's going to give us our outside beam. That's going to give us our support. Then we're going to take our other piece and put right in front of it, this piece actually, and put in front of it level to this, and that's going to give us our barbecue section. So before I do that, however, I got to remove the step that I put here, because the step is now in the way. Want to save those screws. These things never die. So there's my step. Now I have to make a decision on this. I have a 2x8 going across the front of this. Am I going to A, put a beam down, put a beam here, here, and put it on my deck, bolt it here, bolt it there, or am I going to Godzilla, as I like saying, Godzilla this, cut this as well, put a beam against the edge so it sits on the actual outside beam, and then put this there. The reason why I'm going to say no to that is when I built this deck originally, if you notice, if you haven't, it's built out of 2x6s. So 2x6s go all the way across the deck until you get to the end. That's a 2x8. So this board, 6, 6, 6, everywhere else is 6. This end piece is a 2x8. Or is it a 2x10? I think it might even be a 2x10. It measures out as a 2x9. We all know they don't make those. So we'll assume that it's a 2x10 that actually is only 9 inches. So, because this is a solid board, I can safely put this right on top of here, screw it in the back, screw it on the top, screw it in the back there, and I will have a very solid beam. Then I can trim this off. This will be staying. When I put this all together, I put my beam back across there, it's going to keep everything happy. So now I have to measure. This is the beam I just took off. Easiest way is to get your pencil. This hasn't moved yet. So we're going to hold this right up, right where it needs to be, and we're going to draw a line. There's our line we're going to cut. So I'm going to cut this, and I'm going to make my support out of it. Okay, so I cut it, measured it and cut it. Let's see how good I measured. I've not looked yet. Looks like it's going to be perfect. So this is now going to sit here. Okay, so we've talked about my level before. I love this level. It does all kinds of things, including this. So this is a point where, yes, I want to make this level, but no, I don't want to sacrifice the strength of it. But yes, I want to make it level, because if you look at the other end of the deck and you look straight through, that is a beam you'll see. So you want that beam to be level. However, we're also going to use a square. If you notice, it's not squared. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to square it off. And when I square it off, that will tell me where it should be for maximum support, going straight down and not on a curve. However, if that ends up not being level, what I'll end up doing is cutting the difference. Okay, so now I'm square. Basically, you take an L, something an L, this is considered to be a square, you put it on the top, and you run it down right where it touches, and it should touch all the way down equally. And if it does that, you're basically squared in. Wish people building houses would actually do this, because half the rooms in my house are not squared at all, causing issues. So now I'm square. So if you look at this, there's no space. It's really straight. Now, since I'm squared, I'm going to take my level, which is what we're going to see of human high looking at it from a distance, and I'm just a hair off. Basically, it's touching the line on the left, not on the right, so it's a hair off. So I'm going to leave it like that because I'd rather have the strength instead of the exact level to get it straight. It definitely is straight right now. Let's make sure both ends are straight. There's the front half. There's the back half. Now, I'm not going to touch anything. I've just leveled it. If I futz with it, I'm going to screw it up. So I'm going to walk over here and pick up 2 screws. And I'm going to put 1 screw here. And I'm going to walk downstairs now. And I'm going to put another screw holding the bottom in place. That's going to hold my support. That's going to make my support. But it's also going to keep it level. So now I'll put a screw right here in the back. Now when you put screws in like this to hold it, if you put the screw going in on a side angle, which this one I noticed did, it's going to go in, and as it goes in, it's going to pull things up towards it, which is going to break the level, and it's not going to be sitting on the floor, it's going to be sitting on this board. So you want to make sure that when you put the screws in, they go straight in, so you're just pushing it together and not making any adjustments. You don't want to make adjustments up and down because that's perfect. You just want to go straight in sideways to hold it where it is. And hopefully not lose your battery as you're trying to tighten something. Because I found this, I didn't put it back where it belongs, so I didn't take the battery off when I left. So now it moves a little faster. Two in the bottom, 2 in the top, two in the top and the back. Now I got a joint. Now, as far as diagonal screws go, since I don't have anything holding the front of this board in, it would look unsightly to take a piece of wood and put next to it and have a beam. I'm going to go diagonal down to hold that front where it belongs. Right into my 2x10, actually 2x9, that's on the bottom. That's going to make sure the front of this beam doesn't move. I'm going to put one on each side. Now I have a solid side on this side of my barbecue. Now I'm going to cut this down this way. And since this is extra support, I'm also going to cut this, even though I can take it all off, I'm also going to cut that side. Actually, I'm not. This looks very unsightly over here. If I remember right, it's the first beam I ever did. That should be all of them. Sometimes I go crazy with my screws. Okay, now I'm going to cut the other end of that. So as we previously talked, okay, we're back. Beam's not cut yet. So when I went to cut it with a saw, it goes up so far, but because there's an overhang here, I can't get the saw up unless I do some funky stuff, making it extremely unhealthy to do. So I did cut a saw up as far as I can. I also have a beam on the top, a piece on the top, because when I cut this, the saw extended. So I have an A-B line. So now I'm going to get my Sawzall and I'm going to cut my A-B line and give me my straight cut. Now when I'm cutting this, I'm going to cut from the top down. Why you're going to cut from the top down? I cut a groove on the bottom. However, while I'm cutting with a Sawzall, the board wants to move because of the weight. On the bottom, it's actually going to start pushing against my blade if I cut from the top, bottom up. So I put a cut on the bottom, and that way, as I cut down, it's going to separate and give me more space because that cut on the bottom is now going to be filled by the weight of the board, tipping the board, letting the Sawzall right through. Nice and easy. Now, since this did not fall on my foot, I'm assuming I have a forgotten screw someplace right on top that I have to remove. Now it's falling on my foot. So I'm going to do the same thing. I have all my supports here. I'm keeping them, I'm not touching them. What I'm doing, I'm going to take this board, now to put this board nice and flat, right against here, and screw it back in. Now I get a flat edge. It looks level and easy, and I actually combine these two beams together, which is always good. If you have 4 points of connection, you have an unbreakable bond. Isn't that like in Harry Potter, an unbreakable bond? Yeah, we're Harry Pottering this. Now I could do somersaults and exercise on my piece of wood. Now to finish that off, I'm going to cut the excess off. I like putting things on I can and cutting the excess to make sure that it's perfect. So if there's any inconsistencies on the other wood, when I cut something straight and put it up, if there's any inconsistencies, you'll see them. If you cut after the fact, whatever inconsistency, it's going to be perfect, especially if it's just a support beam. If it's a major piece, you don't want to do that. Just a support beam, go right ahead. Okay, so now I have another entrance to my deck. So there you go. I can go right under my deck by jumping over a barrier. That's not the purpose. So this, if you notice, is sturdy. This is sturdy. Now I'm going to put my two beams up. I want to decide how far in I want my barbecue to come. Now most of these barbecues are centered. However, the front of this barbecue has all the controls on it. The back has all the pieces in it. So the actual width of the barbecue is 25 inches. The actual width of the front piece that's going to stick out is 3 inches. My beams are 20 inches. So now we've got 23 inches. So if I put this right here, I'm going to have all my weight centered about the back, about right where my actual support is going to be. So I'm going to actually center this right at the front. That when you walk up, it's going to be level and look nice. So now this beam, our first beam, is going to go right here, and it's going to be right square to everything, and we do want this level, which means I'm putting one screw in the front. I just only have one battery right now. It means same way I did the roof when I was putting these up. Put one screw in the front, we know where it is, and we'll level with the back. So the front's gonna be where it belongs, the back, which is farthest away, if it has to be anything to be level, because we want this perfectly level. So not many on a deck, it has to be perfectly level, but this, we want to be perfectly level. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a board down on top. I'm going to put this board in, and now I have my push beam so I can push it up. The question is how far out. Put my boards together, pushing down on my boards. Then I can hold it. Best way would be to put a screw in first to get it started. So I want to get a screw started. So I'm going to put it right in front. Where I just barely feel it in the back. Okay, now it's time to put this board on. We want this board to go in. I put a screw in front for pivot, just like we did the roof, same pivot point. I'm going to put this here, and I want it to be level. I want the front to always look level, so I'm going to put this up using all your body parts. I'm going to put this up, push this down. That's going to give me a straight in the front and a straight there. So now I have a straight edge that goes right across. Can I use my level? I can use my level as well. Use a straight edge on the level. Push down on the level, push up on this, where it's lined up, put the screw in. That should be straight. Now we're going to get our level, because we want our barbecue to be level. In case there's any juices, anything that falls, there's a drainage hole. We don't want the stuff in the drainage hole to go not in the drainage hole. Now let's just, for sake, let's line this up where it's level with our top. And we're going to hold that there. And we'll put our level and see how perfect our level is. It's pretty damn close. Always check twice and screw once. So we're in. When I walked to get my screw, it moved. So now since I know it's going to move on me, I'm going to put my screw somewhat in to where it's going to be. Get it started. Come back to my level. Make sure there's nothing on top of my piece of wood. Make sure there's nothing on my level. Put that down. Move this up little by little. If you pound on it too hard, you'll take your air and make little bubbles. I did that a couple times. It's annoying. So you want to hit it very short, very small. Make sure we're right level where it belongs. Hold the bottom. Check it. We're still level. So that's our beam. That is not going to move. Since it's not going to move, now we can put some screws in. So you want to check your screws. The screw length you use compared to the wood you're screwing into. If you do that and you notice that the screw comes out, put your screw at an angle. It takes more space, and putting a screw at an angle here isn't going to make anything because you've already connected the board in. So I'm going to put my screws down through here on a little bit of an angle. That way they don't pop out the other end and be unsightly and sharp edge for people to cut on. I want to put them in all the way. That way there's no screw that's going to get in the way of me putting my barbecue up. Again, I'm making another side beam where everything is supporting everybody else. Nobody can ever say I don't put enough screws in to hold things up. So there's that edge of my barbecue. Level, perfect, done. I'm not going to see this. I'm not going to see most of this. All I'm going to see is this. Now let's get our piece of paper, our piece of wood. We know that our barbecue is 34 inches. So before I put this side on the other side, I'm going to measure to make sure that between those 2 points, I actually have 34 inches. I can put it here. It's easier if I just put it here and hold it. It's going to be, it doesn't matter what side it's on. So if I go from this side to this side, I should have 34 inches. And there we go, 34 inches. So that is our space we're going to go in. Now we're going to go down and we're going to measure the barbecue just to make sure. Now where we measured in the barbecue is behind this. There's a beam there. So we're going to put our beam, make tape measure here, tape measure there, go right across. It's 34 inches. So we're right where we need to be. Okay, so now we're ready to put the board on the other side. However, we don't have a flat edge to go by. This is where we have to do some assumption. I don't particularly like assumptions, but in some cases you have to do assumptions. I cut this beam off. I cut this beam off, the top. You can call it the banister. I call it the eating surface, whatever it is. I cut that pipe, that piece off right from here. This went to this side. It butted up to this side. So I have a measurement from here, using this side, from A to B. So if I use that same measurement, and I actually mark where this side was, in reference to the front of my beam, if I go on this side, use the same measurement, I can come to a conclusion of where my beam would be, as long as I go the right way. So that should be where that goes. Another way of doing it is if you had a really long level, or a square edge, it's long, or even a piece of wood. If I was to take a piece of wood, for instance, and I was to put against this and hold it, and I was to go this way, if I'm holding this tight, it's going to give me a distance on that side where it's holding tight. This is not an exact way of doing it, but it's going to give you so you're right. So holding this up and tightening that up so where that's level, you're not leveling it there, you're pushing on this side, making sure this is a tight beam, and I know my line is there. That's another way of doing it, continuing the straight line until it hits there, because that's going to want to be continued straight. Or you can measure from the front to the back, put the same measurement at the back, and you can go to the front. Either one of those techniques will work and should give you similar to the same effect if everything is squared up. And it does. So now we're ready to put this side on using our oddball, strange measuring technique. We made our mark, pick our best side. I think that's it, because we're going to see some of that. So you want to be able to see our best side. Here's our flat edge. Should make sure we're flat in the front. Put a piece of screw in. You don't want to be completely off, you want to be fairly close. Level up the back. Get our measure. We're going to make sure that we're level this way. Pretty close. Now you want to take how these have pieces in the back that are sticking out. So take your level, if you have one long enough, and put across those. And if you do that, and you do it right, and everything is worked the way it should be, you should be level. Just like this one is. Level. So my barbecue is going to be level. Now, why I'm actually looking at all these different levels, I haven't actually attached that side yet. So I want to slowly move over. I know I used a square to put a square in. Verify the square, put it right there so it stays. Take this off because it will drop when you start vibrating, and you'll break your level. And now we'll put another beam in. Another screw in. Which I'm doing very slow. Now I can screw the hell out of it. This barbecue is never really moving. It's here to stay. So originally when I decided I was going to do this, I'm like, oh, I'm going to put the barbecue in the wood. So I think I need to take and put support, such as metal, around the wood. So the barbecue doesn't actually melt, or not melt, doesn't start the wood on fire. Well, I find out possibility of that actually happening is so slim that it's not even worth bothering with. So I'm not going to bother with it. So now I have my supports for the barbecue. It should fit right between those two pieces. How am I going to get that up here? That's always an interesting thing. Don't know yet. So now it's time to move the barbecue to the top. How much of that are you going to see? I don't know yet. I'm just going to leave the camera running, make comments as I always do, and we'll see what happens. Yeah, we're going to see what happens. I think I'll be able to get pretty close. If I didn't have the shed back here, hopefully you can hear me, I don't know. It's facing me. You should be able to hear me. If I didn't have the shed board right there, I'd be able to pull straight in. But it looks like the barbecue is almost at the edge, so I'm going to get real close to my shed board. The question also is excess weight. See, when I lift the barbecue up, I'm part of the weight that's leveling it. So as I lift the barbecue up, my weight, when I can step off this, is going to change. I'm hoping it doesn't change too much. Now what I did is I wedged my bucket against this piece of wood. So that should stop it from tipping on me, because the problem with the mini skid steer is it doesn't have a lot of weight. So if you overweight the front, the back ends up tipping the front forward because you're not standing on it. That's an extra poundage of weight. Never a dull moment around here. Make sure your fingers aren't under this if it drops. It's going to get to a point where it's going to drop in place. Like that. That's the thing about one-man builds, but a lot easier if you had more than one. That's the point. A lot easier if you had more than one. Okay, so when you get the barbecue in, on either side, there's extra screws in the front. I didn't measure for the extra screws. So I have to lift the barbecue up, take my Sawzall, and cut the front of my beam, which you'll never see. That way the screws will fit in. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I cut them. See the groove I cut? See these little screws right here? I cut a groove so they fit. And I cut a groove on both sides. I haven't tried it yet. We're going to try it together. So I got my groove cut. Now I'm going to take my beam out. I put the hold up a barbecue for temporarily. And there we go. Now the barbecue is in. I think I might have warped the door a little bit. That's an easy fix. We'll check the level. Level's right in the money. Really isn't going anywhere. Now if you want to be fancy, you could get a couple of the crown moldings, and you could put crown moldings right here in front, little tiny ones, right in front. That way it finishes off the front. You can put one going all the way up the top. That way it finishes off the top. This is an outdoor deck for me to use. Not selling the house, I just want it to work. I want it to sit there. It's fine for me. The funniest thing is when you look at it, it looks crooked. But when you measure it, it's not. So, definitely does look crooked, even though it's not. I think it's because the ceiling is crooked. So when you look at it, you think the ceiling is straight, but the ceiling pitches. So this looks like it goes up because the space gets smaller. So it's like an optical illusion. I have an optical illusion on my deck I built. Because when you look at this, and then look at the ceiling with it, it makes it look like the barbecue is crooked. When you look at the floor, and you look at the barbecue, it doesn't look like it's crooked. Okay, so I figured out the problem when I look at it. The floor of this deck, the first section of floor, I hired somebody to come in and I assisted him, but he built it. This floor actually goes down at an angle. He said he wanted to put it on an angle because he wanted to have the water run off it. Of course, it's not important now because there's a roof over it. But now since there's a roof over it, it's still on an angle. So it does have a little bit of angle. So this is straight, the floor is crooked. This is actually 30 to 31 inches. The floor is exactly an inch off from there to there. So this actually has quite of a big pitch. I wish I built it myself and I built it level. At that point, I wasn't planning on a roof. Probably wasn't his fault because I didn't say anything about a roof. We were trying to build a deck, and I guess in his mind, if the water runs off the wood, it's better than it's sitting in the middle, even though it's only 2x6s. So, that is that. We move on.